Greetings my friends and welcome to No Nonsense Metal Reviews. I'm George and this is the No Nonsense Metal Reviews top 15 albums of 2022. So this is probably the biggest event of the year for music fans, metalheads in particular, where we have that time to reflect on all of the amazing releases or our personal favourites from throughout the year. And this year, although I do feel like I'm saying this every year, in the last few years anyway, this year has been a killer year for heavy music. We've had some incredible releases from some of the biggest names, some of the best, and seen some amazing material coming out from new bands and younger bands, but we've been absolutely spoiled this year. So, originally, I was going to try and just do 10 albums, a top 10, but 10 was just not nearly enough. I was having to neglect so many amazing albums, killer material. Thought about doing 20, but I think 20 was just a little bit too much. I think you've got to kind of meet in the middle. It has to be a mixture of your personal favourites, all the things that have really taken you by surprise, but you don't really want to just talk about everything that's come out this year. So I settled on 15. And I will say that these choices are just my personal preference. These are just my favourite 15 albums of 2022. This isn't talking about everything that's come out in 2022 because for either financial sake, the fact that music can be very expensive when it comes out. Some labels, they seem to just start their CDs off. I primarily buy CDs, as you can probably tell. Start them off at about £15, £13. I think that's just a little bit much. So I do tend to wait until things drop down a little bit in price, or if it's a good pre-order for $9.99, $10.99, I'll go with that. So there are some notable exceptions. There's also some latecomers, like just had the new Disturbed album, for example. It's just come a little bit too late for me to be able to really familiarise myself with it. Of course, review that album, but that won't be mentioned. Amorphis, I've only just recently got the new album. Haven't really had a chance to get to grips with that yet either. Destruction's new album is just still too expensive. There's also a handful of other albums, quite a few actually. Some things will be missing from the list, and I do apologise. It's not necessarily because I don't think it's all that good. It's just because either my personal preference or I haven't actually got the album yet, haven't had a chance to give it a listen. So, without further delay, let's get cracking. So, we'll go from bottom to top. We'll go in ascending order, shall we? From number 15 through to number 1, being my favourite. I mean, the order in which these have been ranked in could change depending on what time of day it is, or which way the wind's blowing, or the alignment of the stars. It's just, 1 minute I might think that album is slightly better than that one, give it another listen, and maybe things swap round. But loosely, this is the right order for me. So, we'll kick off with number 15. We had a stunning new album from one of thrash metal's longest running and biggest bands. We had the mighty Megadeth returning with The Sick, The Dying and The Dead. And this album, to me, is an absolute stormer. So, just because it's ranking at number 15, it doesn't mean that I think it's a okay, average album. I think it's a very good album. We had some killer tracks here. The title track was a brilliant heavy metal, more of a traditional heavy metal, or more speed metal at times, track. A real great introduction. Did remind me at times of some of the tracks like Trust, some of the slightly more melodic numbers. But you know, this is a damn fine album. That was a damn fine way to kick it off. Other killer tracks, because I've reviewed this album, check out the in-depth review on that if you want. I won't go into too much detail, but I'll give you a few tracks, highlights from each album as I go through. So we had Life in Hell. I thought that was another killer track. Night Stalkers was an absolute thrasher. And I did particularly enjoy Celebutante as well. Mission to Mars was a great track just because it's so different. It's a bit of a jovial, sort of upbeat track, bit of a fun one. But yeah, number 15, Dave Mustaine and Company, Megadeth with The Sick, The Dying and The Dead. A fine album indeed. Very much enjoyed that one. Keeping with a thrashy theme, maybe it's a bit of a death metal, thrash metal crossover, but a superb band nonetheless. We had a killer album from Soulfly this year. Max Cavalera masterminded alongside his son Zion, who's absolutely killing it behind the drums. That guy's an absolute machine. Mike Leon on bass and Arthur Rizk on lead guitars. So we've had a few lineup changes with Soulfly over the years, in more recent years, but this album, this lineup are completely solid, watertight. We had the amazing Scouring the Vial, guest featuring John Tardy from Obituary on vocals with that particular one, a very good ripping track indeed. The Damage Done, that's a killer one, some killer riff work there. Totem, heavy chugging, a masterpiece. Ecstasy of Gold, another killer track. And Spirit Animal, this epic long track with a whole lot of folky native things going on there. It's a whole lot of variation. Soulfly, absolutely killer. Absolutely kill it here. Totem, a superb album. One of my favourite albums from their catalogue over the last few releases anyway, more recent years. Absolutely love that one. Number 13 then. We had the mighty Darkthrone returning with Astral Fortress, keeping a very good succession of releases. They've had a real good run over the last few albums. Following on a year later from Eternal Hails, which was one of my favourite albums of 2021. Absolutely love this album. Do not let that bizarre artwork fool you. This is an amazing album. It's absolutely killer. A real great combination of black metal, speed metal, quite thrashy at times, traditional heavy metal, doom metal. It's a real medley of stuff. And of course, I do go into more depth in my more in-depth review. So I shan't go into too much detail again, but Caravan of Broken Ghosts. Great title, great track. Killer stuff. That is very much in the sort of traditional black metal vein, with a decent injection of speed metal thrown in there as well. Impeccable Caverns of Satan. Love that one. The very doomy Stalagmite Necklace is a particular killer track. Some seriously good riff work there from Nocturno. Kevorkian Times, killer track. But the real highlight is The Sea Beneath the Seas of the Sea, which is a 10-minute plus epic. All of this different ambience and soundscapes being created. Very black, very bleak. It's a very good track indeed. Number 13, Darkthrone, Astral Fortress from Nocturno, Culto and Fenris, the black metal duo. So we're on to number 12. This time we've got something extremely brutal. Something very extreme indeed. More extreme than what I usually listen to, I will admit. But an album that I was recommended and it was spoken about in very high regard by a good friend of mine. This band, I've been familiar with them for a few years, I would say, from one of their early EPs. A band that has gone through a few lineup changes in recent years, or a notable lineup change in their vocalist, but Lorna, American deathcore, I would say symphonic deathcore, the heavyweights. They are really redefining heavy. This album is monumentally heavy, but the inclusion of a lot of synths, a lot of keys, there's a lot of ambience, there's a whole lot of stuff going on there. Very orchestral, very symphonic. It's amazing. It perfectly accompanies the crushing riff work, very technical, very intricate guitar work, crushing breakdowns, absolutely monstrous, demonic vocals. This is a superb album, and it is crushingly heavy. We get some killer material. Welcome Back, O Sleeping Dreamer. A very, very interesting, very diverse and dynamic track. Very good way to kick off the album. The album is quite long, I will say. It's over an hour long, but it's a very gripping, immersive experience. Into the Earth, another killer track. Soulless Existence. We get the 3 parts of Pain Remains 1, 2 and 3 closing the album. Quite a seamless piece. All 3 songs flow into one another. and it's such a beautiful piece. We get some real interesting vocal work variation there, not just growling constantly. We get some slightly different takes on that as well, not just all gutturals. We get a lot of different aggressive vocal styles there. Amazing guitar work throughout, but it's just a killer album. It's a killer way to end the album, those 3 tracks in particular, but we've got some seriously heavy tracks here. Apotheosis and Wrath, killer stuff. Number 12, Lorna Shore, absolutely crushing skulls and expectations with Pain Remains. On to number 11 then. So this one was a bit of a surprise album, really. I was quite confused when I heard about this, hearing that there was a band featuring Chris Reifert from Autopsy, who had gone off and had done an album alongside fellow musician and also fellow member of Autopsy, Greg Wilkinson, who does bass guitars on this album, which is a death metal album featuring 2 members of Autopsy. This is Static Abyss. Now, this album is their debut album. This is Labyrinth of Veins, with that very, very traditional death metal artwork there. Absolutely love that. This album is brilliant. This album, as compared to Autopsy, of course there's a lot of similarities. There is a lot of crossover. Stylistically, it's death metal. So there is going to be certain similarities with Autopsy. Certainly in the fact that you've got Chris drumming and doing the vocals, and then you've got Greg, his guitar work. But overall, I would say that Static Abyss and Labyrinth of Veins is a much doomier effort than Autopsy. It's also much more of a grind punk kind of vibe at times. Stylistically, it's much rawer, if that's even possible, than Autopsy. I absolutely love Autopsy, but this album is a mighty fine piece of work, and there is a difference. Although there's a lot of similarities, there is a difference between Static Abyss and Autopsy. We get some killer tracks here. We've got Feasting on Eyes, which is a very raw, old school track, very grinding. Nothing Left to Rot, very heavy. We've got some really doomy material in Mandatory Cannibalism and the title track Labyrinth of Veins. A lot of doomy vibes there as well. We get a lot of that doom on the closing track, Crawling to the Top of the Dead. It's a brilliant track. Then we've got Tectonic Graveyard and Morgue Rat Fever. Very grinding, nasty, gritty, visceral, old school death metal stuff. Absolutely love this album. I have listened to this a whole lot of times, and I think this is a superb piece of work. It's very heavy, it's very good. It's very raw and very energetic, and as I say, it's very old school. So at number 10, continue the story with Autopsy. Of course, it had to be Autopsy Morbidity Triumphant. Now, this is a very solid piece of work. This came nearly 8 years after the predecessor album, the great Tourniquets, Hacksaws and Graves. Absolutely love that album. So I was very eagerly anticipating this one, and this does not disappoint. Chris and co deliver the good, gritty, old school death metal in top form. Brilliant musicianship. Vocals are great, of course. Stab the Brain, nasty as hell. Final Frost, very heavy stuff indeed. We do get a bit of a doomy flair at times thrown in. It's not just grinding, crushing, old school, gritty, nasty riffs. We do get some doomy stuff going on there. Born in Blood, another killer track. Knife Slice, Axe Chop, Skin by Skin, Maggots in the Mirror. You don't get too much variation of theme here. Of course, you know what you're going to be in for. This is old school death metal. Thematically, certainly sounds like it as well. We've got maggots, we've got blood, we've got gore. This is just a killer album. Does not disappoint, does not let down their amazing run of albums that they've had since reforming and coming back. It's a killer album. Morbidity Triumphant from Autopsy, my number 10. So we'll go to number 9 for another old school death metal album. This is Jungle Rot, and this album is A Call to Arms. Now, I love Jungle Rot. I think they're a brilliant band. They're one of those death metal bands, old school death metal bands, that verges very much on the more extreme thrash side. The riffs are chugging, thrashing, brilliant, brilliant stuff. Amazing musicianship. It's fast, it's furious, so much chug, so much groove. What's not to enjoy? The title track is a killer one. Beyond the Grave delivers some monumentally heavy riffing. Absolutely love that. Vocals are brutal throughout as well, of course. We've got Vengeance and Bloodlust, another very good track from this album. Death Squad, Total Extinction, Population Suicide. It's all very bleak, it's all very nasty, but this is old school as hell. As I say, very nice chugging thrashy riffs. It's just a brilliant album, and it does not disappoint after their amazing self-titled album, the previous album. And then before that we had the likes of Order Shall Prevail, and of course we had that absolutely amazing Terror Regime. Love that album. This is a brilliant continuation of very good, very high quality old school death. Love it. Number 9, Jungle Rot, A Call to Arms. So, on to number 8 then. This album was actually, really, I'm going to say it's probably my first proper introduction to the band. Although I'd been aware of them for many years, I had actually seen them opening up for Nightwish and Arch Enemy a number of years ago at the Wembley Arena. I had never really actually gotten into Amorphis, but I saw this album coming out. It was at a very reasonable price, and I thought, well, I'll give Halo a pre-order then. Let's give it a chance, see what these guys are all about. And you know what? It blew my mind. I think this is a fantastic album. It's totally different, totally independent, and very, very unique stuff. I really do love the way they meld folky elements, very melodic sort of death metal elements, a lot of synths. It's very progressive as well. There's almost a hint of Opeth at times, or Enslaved. But you know what? I think this is a beautiful album. Northwards is a killer way to start the album. It's that perfect balance of crushing heaviness and very folky melody. On the Dark Waters, again, it's a beautiful track. My favourite track's probably The Moon, which is an absolutely stunning piece of work. Very progressive, very folky, very beautiful stuff. Amazing soundscapes and synths there. Seven Roads Come Together, another beautiful moment as well. Really good stuff. Amazing vocal work, incredible stuff. Perfect balance of cleans and aggressive with growling. My Name is Night, another beautiful song. Surprising stuff. But we do get some heavy material as well, in the likes of War or The Wolf. We've got some really, really very different material here, but it really does stand out. It's so unique, it's so impressive, and it's instantly memorable stuff. So Amorphis with Halo had to be number 8. Halo from Amorphis. So we're getting close now. The competition was getting very stiff at this point in the list making, and it did take me a bloody long time to devise this list. But for number 7, I could not neglect one of my favourite death metal bands, one of the best and most consistent death metal bands in my opinion, Immolation with Acts of God. Now this is a phenomenally heavy album. Not quite in the sort of crushing, breakdown driven way that Lorna, for example, is a crushingly heavy album. This is just start to finish old school death metal brutality. Amazing riff work, amazing vocal performance. The bass is thick and heavy, and the percussion is crushing. This is a fantastic album. These guys do not have bad albums. They do not disappoint. We had the amazing run of albums from them with Atonement, Kingdom of Conspiracy, Majesty and Decay. We've had some amazing albums from these guys in recent years. And you know what? This does not disappoint. Does not let the side down one little bit. This is a freaking heavy album. Amazing tracks here. An Act of God, amazingly heavy. Of course, expect nothing else. The Age of No Light, another brilliant track. We've got Shed the Light, Immoral Stain, Broken Prey. This album just delivers crushing heaviness from start to finish. It's an absolutely majestic album. Not for the faint-hearted. This is one of those albums that is just packed full of crushing brutality. Immolation, Act of God. Number 7 for me. Number 6 was indeed a very difficult one to choose because my first impressions of this album were very mixed. And I did do, of course, a very in-depth review of the album, which you can see on the channel, but this album is certainly nothing like any of its predecessors. It's one of the most difficult to understand and to follow what the hell's going on of all of their albums. It's a very good album, but it's very challenging. In my opinion, the end so far by Iowa's new metal turned just extreme powerhouse Slipknot, legendary band that they are, this album is a bit of a difficult one. Namely, because you start the album with Adderall, a track which is a very interesting kind of bluesy, poppy, funky track. Very slow, very melodic. It's a very different track, but it's a long song. It's over 5 minutes long, and it's a very weird way to introduce the album. But it's Slipknot. They don't really do conventional. They do not conform to the normal structures and systems of making music. They just do what they bloody well want, it seems. Then the second track got the dying song, Time to Sing, which is a good song. It's heavy, but in my opinion, it doesn't quite flow. With that opening track, Adderall, and then into the dying song, the whole thing just doesn't quite flow. It doesn't pick up the momentum, although it's a good song. Things only really get going with track number 3, the Chapeltown Rag, which is one of my favourite tracks from the album. It's a very heavy track indeed, very diverse, very different. It's quite an old school track for Slipknot, but it's a very good one. That would have made a killer opening track in my opinion. Then we sort of lose pace again with Yen before things pick up again and go really heavy with Hive Mind. A very, very good track. Warranty keeps up the pace before Medicine for the Dead takes things down a pace again, where we've got the sort of more of a groove, more of a melodic edge. But there is some killer material here, definitely. Hive Mind, as I've mentioned, the Chapeltown Rag, Acidic, H377, and the beautiful closing track, Finale. Brilliant stuff. It just takes quite a bit of work to get your head around it, get to grips with what you're listening to. But you know what? It's a damn fine album. It really is. Slipknot, the end so far, it does not disappoint. I did think originally that it would rank slightly higher in my album rankings for the year, but you know what? We've had just too many amazing albums. The next of which is another one of my all-time favourites, a band that is so aggressive and so groovy, you just cannot help but get totally drawn in to that crushing groove. You can't help but headbang and flail your limbs around like a maniac. I'm talking about Lamb of God with their amazing new album, Omens. I absolutely love this album. It's heavy, it's groovy, it's got so much crunch. It's a superb album. Absolutely love this album. It's one of those albums that it seems to just grow on you and get better with subsequent listens. It's so infectious. It's not an overly long album, somewhere in the region of 40 to 45 minutes, I believe, but it's just beautiful. We get straight into the gritty, nasty heaviness with Nevermore, which just opens up and unleashes the crushing brutality from the off. Vanishing, another very heavy moment. Ditch is crushingly brutal. We get these huge slabs of riffs, amazing stuff. Gomorrah is probably the heaviest track on the album. It's just one constant, successive, pulsating breakdown. It's just chug, 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 and it's so good. Absolutely love it. Grayscale, another killer one. We've got the very punkish Denial Mechanism and the slightly longer, more epic closing track, September Song. This is Randy Bly and company, absolutely kicking ass. We have had a lineup change over the years. Of course, we've not got the Chris Adler, the drumming powerhouse, behind the kit anymore. We have Art Cruz on drums. But we've still got Randy, Mark, Willie, and John. These guys are solid musicians. This is a solid lineup. I just knew that Lamb of God were going to feature in the top 5, and that is exactly where they've fallen. Number 5, Lamb of God, Omens. Down to number 4. So this album and this band are relatively new to me, although I have fallen in love with them in a very big way. But this year saw my first real introduction, although I'd known about them, had seen them, as I previously mentioned, that gig alongside Amorphis and Nightwish. Arch Enemy with Deceivers. I have, as you can probably tell, fallen in love with these guys in quite a big way, and this album is phenomenal. Number 4, Arch Enemy, Deceivers. This is a beautiful album. Kicking off with Handshake with Hell, we get some amazingly heavy riff work there from Michael Amott and company. This is freaking heavy, juxtaposed with some very beautiful ambience, amazing vocal work, both aggressive and clean on this track from Alyssa. Amazing stuff. Deceiver, phenomenally heavy. This is melodic death metal, very much leaning far more towards the death metal side than the melodic, but it's just pure chug. Absolutely love it. We've got In the Eye of the Storm, freaking heavy. We've got the very anthemic The Watcher, a brilliant track. Sunset Over the Empire, another very, very decisive moment in the album where things are just so unique. It's so heavy, but it's so different. No one else seems to be doing melodic death metal quite this sharp, this intricate. This is why I think it's so brilliant. House of Mirrors, another great track. Spreading Black Wings. Then we've got One Last Time, very uplifting stuff. And Exile from Earth, again, very uplifting melodic death metal. This album is just a masterpiece, in my opinion. It very nearly ranked slightly higher, but there was just some other albums that were just a little bit better. But you know what? Number 4, in my opinion, out of those 15, that's not a bad spot. Arch Enemy, Deceivers, a killer album. If you're not familiar with this one, you need to check it out. Of course, I've done the more in-depth review, but it's not an album to be missed. So, going back to a bit earlier on this year, we had a return from one of Germany's biggest metal bands, one of the best thrash metal bands around, in my opinion. We had the mighty Kreator with Hate über Les. This album is phenomenally heavy. This is one of the thrashiest albums from the band in recent years, definitely. I loved the likes of Phantom Antichrist and Gods of Violence, but you know what? This is definitely heavier, definitely thrashier, without a doubt. This is an amazing album. It's slightly shorter in length, really. I think it's somewhere between 45 and 50 minutes. It's not as long, I don't believe, as some of their previous albums, but the title track is so freaking rippingly heavy. We've got Killer of Jesus as well, very controversial stuff, but amazing. The riff work is phenomenal, and of course Millie's vocals are as harsh and as raw as ever. Crush the Tyrants, Strongest of the Strong, very anthemic, very uplifting stuff. Become Immortal, a very, very traditional sort of heavy metal track in actual fact. Very good stuff. Very sinister and rather unnerving track in Midnight Sun. Great track though, no doubt. Demonic Future, Dying Planet. This album is just full of just amazingly heavy moments. Absolutely love this album. It's face-meltingly thrashing. Kreator, Hate über Les at number 3. So what albums could be better? You're probably wondering, Christ, you know, what could be better than Arch Enemy, than Kreator or Amorphis? Well, I think that those albums were incredible albums, absolutely amazing, but the album that really took me by surprise this year, certainly after a little bit of a disappointing last album for them in Catharsis, Machine Head have returned and reclaimed the throne of modern, heavy, thrashing, groovy metal. This is a masterpiece. This is Of Kingdom and Crown. I cannot tell you how amazing I think this album is, how much I love this album. Right from the off, I just was completely blown away by that amazing opening track. It's a very long track indeed, over 10 minutes long. Builds up with a very slow, gentle, slightly unnerving intro where we've got Rob Flynn doing some of his best vocal work, his best clean vocal work of his career without a doubt. And then it just breaks away, and then the crushing brutality begins. Slaughter the Martyr. So freaking heavy. It slaughters your eardrums, slaughters your neck. It's so good. Slaughter the Martyr, what a killer way to start an album. Then we've got the brutality continuing on Choke on the Ashes of Your Hate. A very poetic track indeed. So freaking heavy. Absolutely love it. Become This Firestorm is a very thrashing track. My Hands Are Empty and Unhallowed show a very different edge where we've got much slower pace at times. Still heavy. Very emotive, in fact. It's very, very passionate, very genuine stuff. You can feel the energy of the passion in these tracks. Absolutely love those ones. And as I say, Rob Flynn's vocals, fantastic. He does some of the best vocal performance of his career here, no doubt at all. Kill Thy Enemies. Bloodshot, another thrashing number. Then we've got Rotten, very gruesomely heavy track indeed. And one of my favourite tracks on the album, Arrows in Words from the Sky. Very powerful, very big sound, very beautiful stuff. Heavy as hell. Absolutely love this album. Cannot praise this album enough. Machine Head, I absolutely love Machine Head. They've really grown on me in recent years. And this is easily the best album they've done since Unto the Locust, possibly since The Blackening. Their big defining moment. Number 2, Machine Head, Of Kingdom and Crown. Absolutely love that album. Well, we're down to number 1 then. So you're probably thinking, okay, so we've had Slipknot, Lamb of God, Machine Head, we've had all these big names. Who the hell could be at number 1? Well, I had to go with my favourite band, a band that just deliver consistent albums time and time again. Saw them live again the other week for the 5th time, and they blew my mind. These tracks are amazing on studio, and they are just as good, if not better, in that live setting on stage. I'm talking about the mighty Saxon with this just magnificent album. Carpe Diem, absolutely love this album. The mighty Saxon, the kings of New Obum, the kings of traditional heavy metal music. These guys are amazing, and this album, I absolutely love it to bits. It is packed full of amazing material. And just like many of these other bands, they've kept a really consistent run going, where we had the likes of Thunderbolt, Battering Ram, we had Sacrifice, we had A Call to Arms, we had these amazing albums, and this does not let them down one little bit. Carpe Diem sees the day, fantastic, very Saxon. It's a very distinctly Saxon track. Biff Byford's vocal work is on top form. I swear that he's gotten better with age. Paul Quinn, Doug Scarrett, Nibs Carter, and of course Nigel Glocker behind the drums there. But all of them amazing musicians. They just deliver these excellent tracks time and time again. As I mentioned, Carpe Diem, very traditional heavy metal track indeed. Age of Steam, very big sounding, very grand. The Pilgrimage is a more of an epic, in all honesty. It's a much slower, more melodic number. A little bit of a doomy vibe there. It's a great track. It's very, very emotive stuff. Dam Busters is a much faster pace, but it's a heavy metal rockin' rollin' track. Love that one. Remember the Fallen is a bit more of a speed metal track. Very good stuff though. Same with Supernova. Lady in Grey is a killer moment. Absolutely love that one. We've got some seriously crushing, chugging, groovy riff work there. Absolutely love it. Black is the Night. heavy as hell track with even a little sort of flair of black metal in some of the guitar work there. Love it. And Living on the Limit, a speedy masterpiece of a closing track. Heavy, just good old heavy metal. Saxon, Carpe Diem, my #1 album of 2022, without a doubt. Not just because they're my favourite band, but because this is a genuinely fantastic album. I absolutely love this album. #1. So we'll go back through in descending order this time, shall we? From my favourite album of the year, 2022, #1, Saxon, Carpe Diem, down to number 15. Just to give you a little recap. #2, we had Machine Head with The Mighty of Kingdom and Crown. #3, Kreator, Hate Uberles, a masterpiece of thrash. Arch Enemy, Deceivers, melodic and heavy as hell. Do not be fooled. Alyssa is no sweet singer. She can be when she wants to, but she sounds like a monster. Lamb of God, Omens, crushingly heavy. #6, Slipknot, The End So Far, more of a difficult listen, but it's still a damn fine piece of work, that is. Crushingly heavy at #7, Immolation, Acts of God. #8, Amorphis, The Beautiful Halo, very angelic album indeed, beautiful piece of work. #9, Jungle Rot, old school crushing death metal with a very nice chugging thrashing flair, absolutely love that. A Call to Arms. #10, we have Autopsy, old school death metal royalty, love this album, Morbidity Triumphant. #11, more old school death from a new band, technically, Static Abyss with Labyrinth of Veins. #12, Lorna Shore, Crushing Our Skulls with Pain Remains. #13, Darkthrone, Black Metal Legends with Astral Fortress. #14, Soulfly with Totem, groovy, chugging, love it. #15, The Mighty Megadeth, the death thrashy, heavy metal masterpiece, The Sick, the Dying and the Dead. So there you have it. No Nonsense Metal Reviews, top 15 albums of 2022. What do you guys think of my picks here? Have you got any personal favourites? Are there any that you think, actually, I think that one was slightly better than that? I'm very interested to hear other people's thoughts and opinions. What are your rundown of your favourite albums of the year? Let's get a bit of conversation going. It's all good, friendly stuff. Don't need to turn on each other just because we might prefer one album slightly more than another one. But thank you very much for watching, my friends. Do feel free to like and subscribe. It's very much appreciated. We're really picking up some momentum now. We're building a metal community here and I love it. Let me hear what your top picks of the year are, and yeah, feel free to critique my choices there. Thank you very much. You take care, my friends. Stay heavy.